Hello, my good people out there, my transformers, those who are watching far and near and wide. We have a wonderful guest for you today. We're going to be talking with William Zenobia, the immersion author who has wrote a wonderful book. I don't want you guys to go anywhere. He's going to tell you so much more about that and much, much more. We'll be back after this wonderful intro video. All right, we are back after the short intro video, and we have our guest, our wonderful guest, William Zenobia, with us. And Will, how are you doing, my good friend?
I am doing awesome. It is really good to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Uh, for many who do not know the backstory between me and Will, we have known each other for many countless years, decades.
Yeah.
So like good decades, almost a decade, right? Over a decade.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I did probably 13 years now or close.
Yeah, so we are approaching that 2 decade mark in a couple of years. So I'm looking forward to that. So we can have our good 20th.
Who's
Uh,
buying dinner?
yeah, yeah. I'll be old and you'll be younger.
There you go. There you go. We'll do it that way.
Yep. There you go. So I'm very familiar with you, and some of my audience, they know of you from a very very old episode I did with you, a very long time for those who have trailed me for these countless years. But how about you reintroduce yourself and tell them what you got going on now.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, first of all, Marcus, thanks for having me on. I super appreciate it. Um, so let's see. We're talking about transformation. so, so my life is always transforming, never in a negative way. It's just I am one of those people who likes to kind of move and just keep going forward. So, the one that Marcus is probably referring to is probably had something to do with wellness and being healthy and all that. And I still am very much involved with that. But he has invited me on the show today because I have authored a book. I'm going to show you a picture. I don't know how well it'll show up and if it's reversed, but what it is it's called A Stranger in the Home. And the reason I wrote the book is because I met the woman of my dreams, right? How many of us get to meet the woman of our dreams or man of our dreams, right? Either way. And she had 4 children. So I'm a guy who got married to the woman of my dreams and woke up and I had 4 children. So now fast forward, it is 13 years later, and I was looking for a way to help people since the beginning of the year, and I jumped into some coaching classes and realized that I needed to write a book. And in that process, I don't know how your audience is, Marcus. I'm a faith based guy, right? So I was praying about it, and it was kind of impressed on me that I needed to write something about being a step parent, because what I realized is there is no support for step parents, and for good or bad, it is a large segment of our society today. People that are step parents, people that are blended families. Maybe you're a single parent with children, whatever the case may be. That was my wife's situation. So that is why I wrote the book, is because I realized there is a very large need to help people in that space.
Yeah, first of all, and I don't know if I ever said this to you. I got to commend you once again, for taking up the responsibility. Being a leader as a man to be with a woman, who has children. Many men today, don't want to take that responsibility on, and don't want to pour that love into both the woman and her children. It is very commendable and very very humbling and very noble to do such a thing. Then also behind that, there's no manual. There's no manual for there's no for parenting, and yet alone step parenting. This is, yeah, remarkable, and this is one of a kind, and I think it's so timely right now when you think about blended families. I have had my glimpses of like dating women that has like maybe one or two younger children, and but during those times period, I have already had my children, so I felt pretty equipped to like kind of slide in, and like it was not a big deal. But I think this is very very timely, and you said you prayed on it, and you came up with it. So I guess the first question that comes to mind, brother, is uh, do you feel like just the title alone, step parent, do you feel like there's a certain uh, tarnishment that's kind of like uh, given to the name, and is do you does it need to be rebranded? Do you feel like your book has like kind of branded it better?
Well, I think, well, first of all, and I know you've mentioned this, right? First of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And the reason that I named the book, and if you go to williamzenobia.com, there's more information on it, and about feeling like a stranger in the home and being a step parent and things like that. And the reason that I named the title of my book "A Stranger in the Home," a guide to navigating the world of step parenting, is because you kind of are. It
Mm.
doesn't it doesn't really matter, but you really are kind of a stranger. So if you look at it, and I discuss some of this in one of my chapters, I talk a lot about what I call the former spouse, and the reason I refer to them as the former spouse is because I want to be respectful, right? And I think if you say ex or ex spouse, I think that's got a negative connotation. So the former spouse, if there is a former spouse involved, sometimes who maybe you enter with the right amount of love, the right amount of care, whether you're a man or a woman, and you love the person that you married, and you probably love the children too. Because I would advise you right here now, if you do not love the children, but please don't put the children through that, and don't get married. You know what I mean? It's an all-in deal. I can't. It's really an all-in. If you're gonna get involved with and eventually marry somebody who has children, please be 100% committed. That was something that I realized. Um, but the other thing that I have found, and for those of you listening, that might be in the same situation, is there are times where you're in the home, and the former spouse, if they're involved in a positive or negative situation, are helping to make decisions in your home, sometimes for good, sometimes not for good, and you really don't have much of a say.
Right.
And so you're present, but you're kind of a stranger. And again, I just figured it kind of fit. I thought the title fit because there are times where you kind of feel like you're on an island all your own. And I'm blessed. I mean, my children respect me. They refer to me as Papa. I've got a beautiful wife, and she's very supportive. And so I'm blessed in my situation. Not everybody is as blessed, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Marcus?
Yeah, that absolutely does, and I just hearing that, what's important is that you recognize that like this is a package deal. When you
Mm-hmm.
marry, uh, you got to have that important thought in the back of your mind that like, hey, I'm not just marrying this one woman. I'm marrying the kids, and then respectfully, you acknowledging that like, hey, there's a former spouse involved. They're not an ex, because just to say, just hearing the word ex says that like they're no longer a
Right.
fact. It's like
Right.
when X is like X factor. So like,
Right.
what does that
Yeah.
mean? And to the we got about over 700 viewing live right now, which is fantastic. Um, how do you have that conversation with the man? I got so many things buzzing in my head right now, but I don't even.
Well, we might have to do a part two then.
what logistically speaking, and some may say, okay, is there an egg and a chicken, approach to this? Like, do we go in? Do we first uh, talk about, when we sitting down with the new honey bun? Do we talk about the former spouse, and and
Yes.
how is that working out, and and how is the co-parenting
Right.
situation with that, and
Yeah.
how fit in, or do we talk about, how do I fit in as, my role, as a supporter, as a potential parent that's going to be rearing the children, and do you even want me to do that?
Right. Well, so all you asked about four questions in there.
Yeah,
So I will do my best to answer that, and here's why. Because in the book A Stranger in the Home, that some of the things people will learn is this, and I'm going to talk to the audience like like I'm doing a coaching session or I'm speaking or something, because I think that's probably going to be the best way. So what I would tell you, if you are either in a relationship or considering getting into a relationship, you really have to start with your communication. And when I say that, everybody's like, oh well, everybody says communication, but I'm serious. If you're the marriage in and of itself brings challenges, right? When you are married and you are married with somebody who has children, and then there is a former spouse, and again, maybe the former spouse is involved, maybe the former spouse isn't involved, maybe the former spouse is a complete turd, and maybe they're an angel. I don't every and that's why this is such an important topic, because every single individual's uh, approach might be different based on what is going on. So
right,
communication, you have to communicate. You have to have these conversations as you are courting each other, as you are getting to know each other. You have to talk about discipline and other things like that. You have to talk about, who's going to have what responsibilities. And the reason that that is important is this: is if you are going to bring somebody into your home as a spouse, right? And even for those who are dating, because I know that there's probably a lot of, for lack of maybe unmarried couples potentially that are out there that also have a blended situation, and maybe they just haven't, they're not married yet. That's a possibility too, I'm sure, in today's society. Um, you have to, if you are going to generate a house that can live in some peace and some um, kind of a situation where it's not constantly butting heads with each other, you really have to discuss, okay, what are the children's roles? What is my role? And what are our responsibilities? How are we going to handle a situation with a child? So I'll give you an example. With Martina and I, we did everything together. Now, we had a lot of communication. We are really blessed. We really work towards communication. And I'm going to be really honest with you. Communication isn't he's watching TV, you're in the kitchen doing dishes, or vice versa, whatever it is, or you're walking through. Hey, baby, how was your day? You come in the back door and you out the front door because you got a softball game. That's not communication, people. That doesn't work very well. Communication really has to be that intimate, sitting next to each other, undistracted, and having a conversation with each other about all of the things that make you vulnerable. And what I find, Marcus, when I talk to people is that vulnerable piece that hits people is the hardest, because a lot of us, we've been in relationships where we've been hurt. We've been in relationships where we've given our heart, and then somebody turns that against us and they use it to hurt us, right? We have those situations. If you are going to be successful, though, you have to enter a relationship where you're not selfish, and where you're going to come into it. You're going to say, you know what? I'm going to put my cards on the table, and this is who I am, because it's going to give you the best possibility of success. It just is. And to kind of stack onto that, I know I'm answering a lot of questions here, but in my, I think it's in my third chapter in the book, I also talk about expectations in the
right,
book. So we get married. right? And everybody, and I'm assuming I can say this on here, I'm not going to swear or anything, but you know what? We get married and we have these expectations, right? You know, the woman potentially thinks, you know, he is going to be my knight in shining armor. He is going to bring me roses every day and chocolates, and he's going to turn the bed down for me. And when I'm sore and achy, he's going to rub my feet and he's going to rub my back, you know. And the guy says, hey, this is great. I am going to have a home cooked meal every time I show up. And I get sex all the time, right? That's what we think. That is, and that how often does that happen? If you think about it, that should, in a good solid relationship, that's all good, and those things should happen. But our view of our expectations in any relationship, we have to remember that there's another person involved in that relationship. So you've got to talk about those expectations. So when you talk about communication and your expectations, you really have to put them together, so that you have the best opportunity to co-parent successfully, date successfully. Because in my mind, our future is 100% our children. It just is. Our future are our children. And so we have to do a good enough job where we are raising them in a way to be, you know, solid, productive, help them make good choices. All of that stuff kind of goes hand in hand. Does that make sense? Is that a kind of wrap it all up a little bit, at least out of the first two chapters of A Stranger in the Home?
You know, that really like does like drive it home, and especially on the part of communication. I think that's really fantastic. You really laid it out. You laid it out very beautifully, and I love like how you ended it there by elaborating to the point of the kids, you know, being like kind of like a almost like a shared goal and a shared mission, you know. And I
Right.
think
Yeah.
once you start focusing on like, hey, you know, I'm going to like move into this whole mindset that like, you know, if we focus on what a share having a shared mission, you know, we can, you know, kind of concentrating on like, hey, I got to make sure he's good, I got to make sure she's good in order that we are both good to move forward this mission. And that's sort of like how like teamwork, you know, begins to like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
shine in any good relationship. And we had these talks like, you know, constantly. You know, and communication always came up in our talks, you know. Uh, so like, so you really, in essential, in a nutshell, you really did answer my question about communication, and and kind of moving back, uh, backwards a little bit. At, you know, speaking of communication and speaking and going back to like, you know, um, just your role as the, you know, kind of like the father figure in the home. One of the things that are concerning is like, you know, kind of like the language, and maybe like name calling that people tend to like tend to do with the former spouse and
Right.
whatnot. And a lot of people get really concerned about like, you know, like, hey, is this guy trying to uh
Right.
replace the dad, or you know, or the mom, and yeah, and you know, how do you deal with that? You know, how do you communicate? Is it like, hey, you know, I'm not here to replace anyone. You know, I'm actually a bonus.
Right. You know what? That is a really good question. And in childhood dynamics, which is one of the chapters in A Stranger in the Home, I actually explain a story that I had with our oldest, and she was probably, we got married. She was 10 years old. I would say she was probably 11 or 12, and I believe we were coming home for church. Something was going on, and she asked me a question that led exactly to what it is you are saying. And I can't remember, I don't recall how she asked it entirely, but I had the opportunity to talk to her and say, look, my my job is not to replace your dad. My job is to provide for you and your siblings, your mother, to protect you, to take care of you, to raise you, in my case, in a God fearing home, to teach you responsibility so that when the time comes, you become a productive person so that when you enter into a relationship, you are stable and you know who you are. And I said, that is my role. And another interesting thing about that topic, actually, Marcus, that kind of leads into it is this is when I have talked to people or spoken to people, here's what you find is that there is more to. So I have a chapter that's called "Smile with Your Eyes," and it's about intimacy in the book. Um, and it basically describes some of what happens with children. We think of having children as just an act of having sex, making love, whatever term you want to mention, right? What we don't realize and what we don't recognize is that the desire for any child, and for those of you watching, you know this. You sometimes sit there and wonder, okay, why I'm the one that's here. I'm the one that's doing the work. So why does my son or daughter have such a strong desire to go and be with the person that's not here? Right? Don't you ask yourself that question? Say, why is that there? Because the biological bond is also a strong spiritual bond. So
Mhm.
you'll hear about children that are adopted and have never met their parents. And they may live in an amazing home, but they still have this draw and this yearning that goes deep down inside where they want to go and meet their biological parents. And that's because it's not just biological, it is DNA, and there's a spiritual piece to it that causes us deep down in our souls to be drawn to that other parent, whether they're present or they're not. That is why that happens. And so for you out there, your job isn't to replace the parent, and it never should be. What I would suggest is this: is you really have to understand your role. If you're, in my case, obviously, since I'm a man, I run my house as if it is my house, and I run my house as if the children are mine. I don't refer to them as my stepchildren. Very, very seldom. I call them my daughters and I call them my sons because I think that brings it, and there's some people that have issues with that. I don't really know why, but there are people that have a problem with that. But I do that because you create a respect in the home, and you kind of know who's, and I don't want to say in charge as if you're ruling somebody, but you start to understand who's in charge, and then they know there's no confusion amongst them. They know who to come to if something's going on
Right.
while you are present in that home. And that is vitally important because we do not give children enough credit, and they watch everything we do. I mean, it starts at like 6 months old, actually before that. But children are far more smart and observant than we as adults give them credit for. I hope that answered your question. I know there's a lot of deep stuff in the book, so I'm trying to grab the nuggets that would be most helpful for the audience who's listening.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, and like, and if we took everything you said so far, man, and we threw that in the river, we probably have a river of diamonds. So, yeah, man, I'm enjoying this right now, and so much of what you say, it can easily translate over into just regular parenting. And I mean, it's really helpful in any situation as well. There's so many different pieces that you can pull out, even in business. If you manage employees, like I'm thinking about that. So
Sure.
think about how you can apply some of the stuff to that, and just with dealing with clients, dealing with customers. And we got over 800 transformers watching right now,
That's
and
awesome, man. You know what? I thank you for being on.
yeah.
I wish I could see everybody, but you know what? God bless you for being on. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely remarkable. This is very very important information. So like since I kind of started like sliding into work a bit, and and I kind of I know what can be very challenging sometimes. It's like, work life and family, balance of that. Uh, how does that play out? And like, what does that look like? For you, especially being able to communicate that. That I know that sometimes they can be a bit of a challenge with, like, how you because, like, you kind of made it clear, like, hey, I structured the family, the family structured a certain way, but the household structure, but then you got to add in all of this other stuff. so
Right.
so how do we do
Right.
that?
Well, so this is going to sound really simplistic to everybody watching, and I have, here's the thing. I want to break this out quick. I'm going to plug this. If people go to williamzenobia.com, I have a free PDF. If you'll give me your information, I got a free PDF that I want to send anybody who wants it, and I'll hopefully we'll be able to get to that, and I'll explain it to you. But what I realize is that you really have everything we deal with is a super simple solution, and that is you have choice. Your entire show is about transforming people, right? You're motivating people to be better. You're teaching them how to transform from one area of their life to another, whether you're talking about business or we're talking about step parenting, whatever it is. And what you have to understand is it is a choice. You get to decide. So what I have decided is the family is the most important thing to me. That is just a decision I have made. And again, and I understand and I respect everybody, based on their financial situation, based on their work situation. That might not always be possible. Um, but if they call me, I take their call. If it's the children or it's my wife, I have made a choice. If they call me, I take the call. Now, typically, if I'm in the middle of something, and I think this has actually happened with you a couple of times, Marcus, if I'm in the middle of something and they call me, I don't necessarily answer. But if they call right back, then that's a sign that they need me and something is important, and then I take the call. That's kind of our little thing. And I will usually start right away, and I will say, I am in a meeting. Is this important or can it wait? And that is kind of a communication thing that I do, because then they respect that I'm doing something. Um, but at the same time, it helps them to kind of gauge where they are. So I have committed, and Martina has committed, that they are the most important thing, because in order to function, we have to all be on the same page at all times. And so my ability to be flexible is better than probably than most people out there. But that is how I've kind of balanced it. I've balanced my work and my family time kind of intertwined. And sometimes that means earlier mornings for me, and sometimes that means later nights for me. But again, that's a choice, and I understand not everybody has that opportunity. But that is how we have structured things, because we feel it's important to be available if there's something going on. And I thought I saw a message pop up. Did something pop up that somebody had a question?
Want to get back get to this real quickly, and then I'm going to let you shout out where you can find the book. So, like, shout out to Michael Jacob out there, who's watching one of our transformers. He said, to everyone at first, family should be the first priority, I think. And then he also said, great conversation. Thank you, Mike, for those comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
so Will, tell us where we can find the book.
so, well, if you go to williamzenobia.com, there's a link on the front page that just says "Get my book." So you can just click on that, and it'll take you right to Amazon. And you can either snag the ebook, or you can snag the paperback, whichever you prefer. And that's probably the easiest, because the link is I've got a great memory, but the link is really long. So 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 I don't have that memorized. So the easiest would probably be to just go to williamzenobia.com, and then click on, get my book. The other option is to search the title on Amazon. I can show you the cover because it's pretty unique, but there is more than one book with similar titles. So that's me on there, of course, and I know it's reversed, but at least you can kind of see the color scheme and kind of get an idea. If you go that right and you search it, then that would be a way to do it too. But the simplest is just to go to williamzenobia.com.
And we can also find you on social media if we want to.
You can, yep. If you just same thing. If you go to my site, you can just do the same thing. Find me on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got some other subject matter on my web page. A couple of things about health and stuff because I kind of expand into ministry and speaking and coaching. So if anybody wants to have I'll offer this to your viewers as well. If you want to reach out and just have a conversation, my first 20-minute conversation is free with you. Just plug in, say I would just like to connect. Tell me maybe what about the subject line. But if you just want to have a quick conversation, and we can talk, and I will see what I can do to help you out, and that'll be on me.
Fantastic. Well, it's been like a wonderful time, like being able to talk to you, get all this wonderful knowledge and wisdom from you. Like, and it's so much more to unpack in that book. We
Oh my gosh, I haven't even scratched the surface. There's a lot.
It's so much. It's so much you have to cover. Those who are watching, we greatly appreciate you guys for tuning in and and spending time with us today on this wonderful late afternoon. If you're watching live, those who want to hear the playback of this, make sure you do the same thing, and that's what those who are watching live done, and that's share this wide and far with someone you know, someone you don't know, and that does help to further the message. And do also leave us with a like, leave us with a comment. Comments are always appreciated. Leave us with a review, or if you are on Apple or any other place that can leave reviews and comments, those are always read and always sent to our guests as well. As always, the links to anything you heard here today that was plugged, such as where you can find the books, such as where you can connect with Will, would be in the episode description, to the left or the right, to the bottom or the top. However you are watching, however you are listening, you'll find it there. And as always, come back again for another episode. This is the Transform You Live show, the only show where you can make real life and business transformation, harnessing the power of optimism, hope, and faith. With your host, Marcus Hart, along with Will today, our special guest.
All right.
Yeah, until next time, we are out. Many blessings, peace, and lots of love.